Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube and you see a link down there, you can actually join the conversation in Zoom, and you just go ahead and click that. If you are an attendee and you're seeing all these panelists here and think that you might be able to contribute something to this conversation, we'd love to have you. All you have to do is get here early enough to do it. We open the doors at 6. You don't have to show up at 6, but we start talking then. At 6:40, we hand out the Discord link. That's where over 800 of us keep talking about this stuff between all these sessions. So you can get the Discord link at 6:40, between 6:40 and 6:42. And then at 6:42, we're going to start mic checks. And mic checks are for us to make sure that the panel is ready, and have good audio, good video, and good internet. And so if you're here by 6:40, you have a pretty good chance of being on the panel. And so if you think that you can add something here, even if you just want to try it, you're more than welcome to. So I think some people get overwhelmed by, there's a lot of good equipment being used here, and folks have some practice here, but don't feel too overwhelmed. I think a lot of us started that way, so feel free to jump in and be part of the panel. Also, if you're an attendee, you may think that you're just here to watch or to listen, but we really need your help. We need you to, you're really the producers for the show, and we need questions. So you need you to ask questions, to vote on questions. Right now, we don't have a ton of questions, and so it's going to be a slow show if you don't do your part. So, but ask questions, ask them early, ask them often. What are you running into? What are little things that you're trying to figure out, whether it's in audio, video, virtual meetings, just general production. Those are the kind of things that you want to, think through. So anyway, so we're going to, a couple announcements real quickly about what's coming up. We're going to talk about getting work and expanding work today. This is kind of our wild card day. And then Tuesday and Wednesday, we're going to talk, these are the second hours. The first hour is all just general Q&A. Second hour is kind of a more vertical talk. There's a lot of interest in that whole, like, how do we get work? How do we expand work? And we talked about it a little bit, and then talked about making it a longer discussion. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And then we're going to kind of return to scopes, audio scopes on Tuesday and video scopes on Wednesday. We took kind of a first pass at it a couple weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago. And we were like, we got to come back to this. So we're going to go through it again and talk a little bit more about those scopes. I'm going to be pumping some video of that in so we can kind of really look at them a little bit in a little bit more detail. So we'll talk about those a little bit more tomorrow for audio, and then Wednesday for video. One thing to note about tomorrow, Apple has an announcement. And so we're going to actually have a separate webinar, and I'll send that out in the morning reminders tomorrow morning. I'll send the link out, but we're going to have a separate webinar that is just the Mystery Science Theater version, the Office Hours Mystery Science Theater version of covering the event. So we'll all jump in. We're not going to pump the video into the Zoom. We're all just going to talk. So you can open it up on another window and listen to it and watch it and say what you want to say about it. So we'll discuss both. Ours will be a little different than everybody else's because everyone else is going to talk about what Apple announced, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But we'll also talk about the show itself, the structure, the cameras, all the other bits. So it should be a pretty dense conversation. That's a lot more than just what's new in the iPhone. It'll be about virtual event production and so on and so forth. So that's going to be at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. Anyway, so we're still working out a couple little details for the end of the week, and I'll have that for you soon. Anyway, let's Phil, do you think we can put you into question duty today?
I'm there. Absolutely.
All right, good.
All right. First question's from Fenwick. I guess he's listening in today in absentia. Since Guy inks in the West Coast, links, I don't know what inks in the West Coast, earthquake country, what kind of special precautions has he done to secure his hallway studio? Any others want to chime in? Note, since Guy lives, I see, he corrected it later on, since Guy lives on the West Coast. How do you?
It's kind of funny because it brings back a memory of I was teaching Final Cut back in 2001 during the last big earthquake we had, and I was in front of a class, and the projector was on this monitor arm, and I just remember I was pointing at something on the screen, and the whole screen just went whoosh because the projector moved, and I had to tell everybody to get into the desk because I come from California, and I was like, I grew up in this stuff. But good question, Chris, because this TV right here is about 15 feet that would fall straight down, and if somebody was down there, so it gives me something to work on. I got a lot of stuff to secure. There's a ring light right here that would, with a weighted light stand, and then my teleprompter, everything would just, so probably a good idea to start securing some stuff down.
my wife is from Southern California, and when she visited my parents in Pennsylvania, she just thought the idea of having bookcases up behind the bed was just the craziest thing she'd ever seen. Like, just the idea that you have a whole bunch of books and all these other things right over where your head is just didn't seem like that would be something that you should ever think about. But yeah, so you definitely have to think about securing those types of things when you're building out bits and pieces. I mean, we've had a long dry spell of any serious earthquakes here, but that just means we're more due than we were before. But yeah, it's probably a whole disaster preparedness second hour we could probably do. We think more about, on some of the events I work on, we think more about bad actors than we think about earthquakes. I mean, we probably should think more about earthquakes, but there's security teams and process, and and we talk about if something happens, because I work on events that a lot of people are watching and some people aren't happy about, and all that other stuff. And so, or there's someone who's a lightning rod for something. And so there's a lot of you want to think about, what your team should do. We usually have some version of a code word that if you hear someone say it, and we have to be very careful about it. If someone says a certain word over comms in our productions for some of these high profile events, everyone will stand up and walk out. Like literally they won't try to figure it out. They won't ask anybody why. They won't, but if you hear that code word, it just means just leave the building, and we have where we're going to leave the building and how we're going to leave the building. And, you're just, and usually it's not the way everybody else left the building, because that's the craziest thing ever. Just to everyone leave the same direction, because it's not a safe thing to do. Anyway, but definitely thinking about those, those plans, especially when you're working on those larger events. Internally we just say, when did Noah build the ark? Before the rain. So you want to think about, you don't want to try to figure out when, how you're going to do that in the middle of the rain. You want to be thinking about how you're going to deal with that, and that's with all things. That's just one piece of resilience that you want to think about. And go ahead, John and Jeffrey.
If you aren't aware of the Great California Shakeout website, they do an annual drill, and it has a lot of resources. And I use that event like I use leap year to change batteries in my clock. That's the Great California Shakeout. I participate in the drill, and then I go around the house and see what things I put up in the last year that aren't secure.
Yeah, Jeffrey?
Do movie studios have an on-site seismologist or a room or anything like that?
No, but I mean, there's a lot of codes on how you build stuff. So big studios generally have people paying it. There's a lot of how you build it up on a large set. There's an awful lot of safety that's just required. I don't think you have a seismologist, but you have a lot of people that they're just worried about things falling, and it doesn't always work. I mean, there's still lights fall on actors and and performers and everything else. But there's a lot of, generally, if you're working with a good team, there's a lot of backups to the backups. Paul and then Mickey.
Yeah, just speaking of natural disasters, since Guy and Sky and several people live on the West Coast, do you guys have any fear of global warming and the oceans rising on the coastal areas, or do you think that's decades or centuries away?
I don't know. I think we're varying away from media. I think I will say that I did make the calculation. If the global caps completely melted, the water would come right up to the lower yard for me, which would be, so I'd have beachfront property. So I felt like I picked well. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just to add to what you were saying earlier about studios, on at least on narrative shoots, it's the best boy grip, best boy electric, and of course the first AD that's in charge of safety. And well, of course, every person in the crew has a responsibility as well to speak up if they see something. Right. And yeah, inside of a studio itself, there's usually a fire line, and that space at the edge of every structure, a big open structure, I think 1.5 meters or 2 meters wide, has to be kept clear. Nothing stored there, no carts left there, and that's a safe space where people can go to walk along to get to the exit.
That's good. Go ahead, Joe, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want to say that we here on the East Coast are definitely not immune to earthquakes and other natural disasters. So if you're doing anything important production, you should keep that in mind, even if you're on the East Coast. I mean, we had one, was it 5-10 years ago? I don't remember. And apparently, and I'm not an expert, but something about the East Coast means that you feel it. The radius is a lot larger than it would be on the West Coast. So if there's like a magnitude 5, for example, I think the last one we had was around the DC area, but it shook us here in New York. So definitely something to keep in mind here as well.
As you build everything, just think about what would happen if it fell down. That's a good general production tip. Next question.
Yeah, Mickey asks, Alex, for $800 to $1,000, a single contributor kit for Zoom-based event, and go.
So generally, we would use a BRIO because we can control it. I mean, it's a little less expensive than the Huddle Cam, and we can control it remotely over Zoom. So the BRIO camera is what we use for that. 2 of the Nanlite 68s, the 68Bs that we can control. They're pretty big, and we can put them on either side. They've been hard to get. That's why we ended up with 200Bs, which are a lot more expensive. But they would fit into that budget, and you'd have 2 of them kind of on either side to kind of light them up. We would decide whether you want that you either going to see the background or we put a laser light behind them. We're kind of very binary about that. So we, either it's their natural background or it's a gray screen, and we just don't really play around with a lot of other things when we're talking about sending a small kit to someone. Audio implements, IFB is what we would send out. It's from a cost perspective. That is what the autos we've been sending out, and I feel like the quality of the autos has dropped over time. And so I compared actually some newer ones that we bought to older ones, and the loudness in the auto, their gain is different. And so they've obviously changed some component that makes it significantly less useful to us. So audio implements is a little bit more expensive, but it's kind of the industry standard. And then the mic was still, just that gets into that where in that mic, level that we'd want to go. We do find that, we like headsets, and there's a lot of headsets, as we found, between $10 and $450. And so it's just a matter of figuring out where that can stretch. Our larger kits that go over $1,000 have a mixed pre with the H6, is what we're sending out. But the smaller ones, the really small ones, the $300 range, we're sending out the Polsons now. That's what we're using at the moment because the piles are sold out. So the Polsons are actually same or in there. It's just the key is to have 2 ears, and if we get the cheap ones, we get 2 ears and a single ear, and send both of them to the person, because if they have thick braids, it turns out that the 2-ear one doesn't work well. Or there's certain hairstyles it just doesn't work with, but the 1 ear is a disaster when it comes to, you have to send out surgical tape with it, so they can tape it to their, otherwise it just turns into this thing you're constantly chasing. And then we often we talk to them, and in standard we find out what kind of computer they have, and we send them an Ethernet cable as part of the kit. So, it's just like, we figure out what their run is. If we don't hear from them, we'll send them a 25-foot Ethernet cable. If we do hear from them, we'll figure out how far they are from the router. And you'll get things like, whoa, the router's like 200 feet away. And I'm like, okay. And then we send them a 200-foot cable. Like, it's just like...
Yeah, 200 feet of Ethernet beats any length of Wi-Fi, period.
Oh my gosh. It's just, Wi-Fi is such a disaster. And I put a tweet out about, the hierarchy of needs when it comes to that. It was a little bit of a rant because I had a lot of bad connections over the weekend, and number one thing is getting off of Wi-Fi, then getting good audio, then you can start dealing with the other thing, lights, then camera, then then the earpiece. You're gonna ask anything else, Mickey?
Yeah, definitely. Like, of course, as a sound guy, like sound over picture, but curious.
It's sound over picture all the time. Like, it is, like, whether you're a sound person or not. What contributes to, I strongly believe that what contributes to, and why we have a 20-minute mic check every single day, is when people talk about Zoom fatigue. As someone who's been in hours and hours and hours of phone meetings with people on speakerphones, I can tell you that the Zoom fatigue is bad audio, because it's just like when we would get into meetings with people who are in a roomy office, and they've got a conference call, I was exhausted after every one of those meetings because I'm trying to figure out what they're saying. It's just, and so you just need people the most important thing is for people to hear what you're saying clearly. And then after that, we can work on all the other things. Go ahead, Mickey. And
Yeah,
then Joe.
I'm curious that like yeah, the BRIO is $200, right? So that's around like 20% of the budget. Like I'm curious, like after the BRIO, is there nothing?
910.
Is there no? Okay.
Or 920. C920 would be the one. And in a normal environment, the C920 is like $80, right? In the current environment, it's about 120 to 130. The big thing about the BRIO that saves us over and over and over again is being able to reframe inside of Zoom. So when we send it to them and we fix so many things, you're trying to explain to someone, tilt it down, tilt it up, tilt it down, and then you just go, just don't do anything. And then we zoom in, move it around, and get it to what we want. And we're still getting a nice sharp image. That is, so that's why we send out BRIOs. And then otherwise the C920, and I'm not having
what would be your step up from the C920? Is there nothing worth like going up unless you go all the way to like a pocket?
I think that we only go to a pocket. So for after BRIO, the next one is a 6K.
Copy.
6K with something that's going to get it, web presenter or something else. I mean, the huddle cam is great. It's just heavy for a lot of folks. I think it's great as an overhead, and I think it's great as a controller. And I like to play with it, but the problem we have to think about with everything that we send out is how, as a person, like you can't put a huddle cam on someone's laptop screen. It just falls back or falls forward. And so those are the things that we think about. It's not just what the camera can do. It's also, how are they going to set it up? Like we have these great ring lights that we thought were going to be good, but they're too heavy and too big. And, so we're moving to something that has to be simpler, and it has to do with the deployment by a civilian, on the other end is, you want to kind of think through that. And we send out, when we build a new kit, we build a new video of how to put it together because, we send them the video, you watch, and it has to be less than 5 minutes, and we shoot for 2 or 3 minutes long of how to put everything together and I just shoot it with the iPhone, so I don't make a big production out of it. You have to, you have to make sure that it's easy to put together. It's not just that it's whatever it is, but that's what we're thinking about. Go ahead, Guy, and then Joe.
I was just going to say, I'm trying out another camera today that might be that stopgap. It's this $700 Panasonic. It's mainly a vlogging camera, and it's pretty cool for that with a flip out screen, but this is $699 and with the lens of 12 to something, and it's decent. I mean, you kind of.
The main thing is that we go into the other reason that we stick with a webcam is just that it literally we get pushback from a consumer or a civilian every single time we add another thing they have to connect. So you just have to think about, like, if I have to have an interface, am I gonna, is that going to be worth it? That's a big piece of that puzzle. Joe, and then Phil.
One thing I find regarding video that's even more important than the webcam is things like muting yourself when you're not speaking, because what ends up happening is Zoom, Hangouts, WebEx, whatever you're using, ends up going back and forth between different participants because it can't figure out who's speaking because people have open mics and there's stuff going on in the background. And that to me is extremely exhausting, especially if you're full screen, because it just ends up flashing back and forth between several different participants who aren't speaking. So you hear one person speaking and then you see the video from another person because everyone has an open mic.
Well, there's two things there. One is that the way we do it, we do point to point, so we don't have that. We actually tell people never mute your mic or your camera. Like, we just need you to just do your thing. And then the second thing is that that's why you have someone individually editing one of these shows. If you're doing something you're going to send a kit out for, you're going to have somebody like Mickey right now is cutting our show. For what everybody's seeing in the webinar and on YouTube is all something that Mickey's making those decisions. He's not waiting for auto switch to do that. And, one of the fundamental things that Zoom needs to fix is the fact that the editing process is so painful, and it could be a lot better. Even Hangouts 8 years ago or 9 years ago was better, which is that we could just, what we call sticky click. You just click on the screen that you want to lock on for the broadcast. And that would make a big difference. And there's a bunch of finer iterations of that can be done. Go ahead, Phil.
Would that the next level up camera, wouldn't that be good for just using an iPhone, or is that too much for a civilian to try to rig up a?
Well, then we have to know if they have an iPhone or not. And then we have to rig it
No,
up.
you'd send them an iPhone. You'd send a.
Well, that'd be more expensive.
Well, it's
I mean,
$800 like that.
I don't
He's
think that
asking for
would-
something between a 6K and a.
I don't. Then they have to open up an app, and then there's the user. What user do we put in there? I mean, it just gets into this there's a simplicity, and then there is the big version,
It's
of
a
it.
civilian friendly thing.
Yeah, and so you have to, everything we think about, we have to think about like how many cables and what are they going to get lost on, because they'll get lost on everything, and so these are, we just have to remember they're not us. And the last kit we just sent out recently was a bunch of people that were pretty technical, so it was easy, but it was in general that can be a real challenge. Next question.
Yeah, I ask, when streaming live to YouTube, what is the technique to confirm the video and stream prior to going live in the audience?
So what I do for that is, and anyone else can say how they do it, but what I do is I use 2 events with the same URL ingest. So I create an unlisted event, and then I have the public event. And in the unlisted event, so I'm streaming to the same ingest, and from YouTube's perspective, it is identical. Like, it is not going to be any different than what you sent out there. So what you do is then I can open up that unlisted event or private event if it's a really secure one. I can look at it. I can check my captions. I can check my videos. I can do whatever I want. I haven't hit live on the actual event, but they're both sharing the same bits. So they're sharing the same ingest point for that.
So you wait till you hit live in the YouTube studio interface.
I never do it any other way. Yeah, I always do. I never want YouTube to do anything automatic for me. Like, I want to hit live in that, manually hit live, to that process. Okay. And so if we can't do that for some reason, the big thing that we're trying to figure out, from the time we sit down till the event, we're doing live streams all the time, checking audio, video, sync, all those things. The biggest thing that we're trying to figure out typically right before the event is whether the captions are working. Like, captions are the bane of our existence, and I understand that they're important, but the infrastructure that supports captions is so rickety that in broadcast, it's rock solid. In what we do, it's not. And so we have to, we're constantly worried about captions. So it's just like this constant obsession of captions. And 2 languages of captions, more. 6 languages of captions, more. It becomes literally like captions become 80% of your show is how you're going to manage something that only 10 people are watching. And so it's one of the, although captions became a lot more important when people started, like Facebook started doing auto on, because that draws you into the show. So then it became a marketing tool, and that's why we end up getting really good at it. But we start shows early. Typically, on our shows, you'll see a little "Welcome to the show." That is us. That's making sure that the captions are coming out the other end. To make sure that works. Go ahead, Jeff.
Kind of a follow-up question to that one. Can you put the same stream key into 2 separate YouTube channels and just have the exact same event appear on multiple channels?
Not 2 channels. You can do it to 2 events in the same channel, but the stream key belongs to the channel. So, what you'd have to stream to both of those. The way you would do that is either through AWS or Restream. Restream would do can send out to as many channels as you want. You'd have a whole bunch of individual ones that you send it to. Or, with our link, we can have, as many YouTube outputs as we want. In that process.
In the AWS interface, you have like a primary and a backup. Can you use the backup as that sort of?
Well, in the AWS, I just have outputs, so I can do.
So you just have another output.
Yeah, I mean, the thing you want to get into is whether you're using a link for primary and backup, and so the more complicated thing is if you have 2 links, one might form the backup streams and the other one forms the primary streams. But when you have them there, you just have multiple. You can, in one link or one Media Live event or channel, you can have 6 YouTube events that you're sending to all at the same time without any.
And then
they're
you
all
can
just
do what
set up.
Jeff is saying, just send it to a whole different channel. Nobody even knows it exists.
You can send it to a whole other channel. We just send it to another event inside the same channel right now, and that works. The reason I like that is because it's the same bits. It's the same bits going into the ingest point. You can have a lot of different things. If you start sending 2 different channels, you're now it could be different
variables.
You're introducing it. Well, yeah, so by having it be the same ingest point that's being shared by 2 events, it means you're looking at the same thing. Like it's not gonna. I mean, if it fails there, it's really on YouTube. Like, and knock on wood, it's never happened. Like that. If an ingest point works, it works. We've had other problems with YouTube, like the events. We had a YouTube database fall apart, and you couldn't start the event. and so you couldn't, like the start button went away, and everything else was running. You just couldn't have a start button. So we didn't tell anybody. We just recorded it because there's a bunch of stars, so you can't. If you tell them that, it'll screw up the show. So we talked to obviously our client and just told them YouTube won't start, and we're gonna record this and post it later. And they were not happy, but not. I mean, it wasn't us. So no, next question.
Yep. Jeff Francis asks, HyperDeck Studio Mini problem. Recorded 2 30-minute videos, SD card into Mac, trim the heads and tails, save the new files on the SD card. The SD card in HyperDeck. Second file's fine. First file is correct length, correct sound, but black picture. Both files play fine in QuickTime on Mac. I've experienced that. Yeah. Can
I go ahead, Jason?
Oh.
The issue is that the H.264 algorithm is a tremendously customizable way of recording. So if you do anything at all to the HyperDeck Mini's setup, anything that re-encodes the file, there's no guarantee that it will
Jeff,
work.
did you record and are you playing back H.264 or Apple ProRes?
These were ProRes.
And then
I'm stumped.
Well, so then the next question though is, did you and you recorded them both, so you trimmed them. What did you trim them in?
Just in QuickTime.
And then but then you had to export them each out, right?
Just did a trim and then save as a new file.
And what I would try is to take those into compressor and trim them in compressor and use the same compression setup. So the exact same profile in compressor on both files, but do the trim in if I'm just trimming, I would just trim in compressor. It's frame accurate and you can see it there, and then you apply exactly the same thing to both of them, and I bet you it would work. But I will say the HyperDecks are super sensitive to any bit, as Jason pointed out, whether it's H.264 or ProRes. Any bit that's slightly different causes all kinds of problems. Both files have to be absolutely identical in every way, shape, or form, or usually they won't even show up. I'm surprised that you saw black. Usually that just the first file that goes in is the one that it specs, and everything else, if it's different, won't even show up. It's like it doesn't even exist. Phil?
Yeah, files showed up. You could see file names. There was sound, just black picture.
Yeah, I would try. I would love for you to try that with compressor, and then let me know if that fixed it, because I suspect it will. Go ahead, Phil.
So it's very likely when you saved it in QuickTime, it changed something. Your best friend in those cases is a utility called Media Info Mac, which lets you examine the exact structure of all the compression. You can A/B 2 files, and it'll show you exactly what's different between the 2 file types, and it'll tell you. So really keep that one in your bag of tricks.
But for HyperDecks, we have a HyperDeck profile, or I have a HyperDeck profile on my computer. I don't put anything on a drive that goes to HyperDeck that hasn't gone through that compression. I mean, everything just goes into the same. It's 422, and it just goes into an Apple ProRes 422, and everything goes through that, so that I don't have to. It doesn't matter where the file was recorded or how it was recorded. It always goes through that system that way. And I haven't had any problems since I did that. I had lots of problems before that. Next question.
And just one other quick tip when you're doing that stuff, learn to FTP from the HyperDeck. It's so much easier than doing the SD card swap back and forth. It's free. It just goes right in, and it just makes it like another drive on your desktop.
Right.
So
yeah, go ahead, Jeff, and then Jason. We'll go Jeff and then Jason.
Is that compressor profile something you can share?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just remind me on Discord, and I'll post it.
Will do.
Yep, absolutely. There's nothing exciting about it. It's just a 422 compression. It's just the same one. Like it doesn't matter that it's special. It's just that it's the same. But I'm happy to post it. Go ahead, Jason.
One last thought also, Mac OS really likes to do a correctable kind of undo happy form of file handling. And you'll notice that anytime you put something on an SD card or any drive for that matter, and then put it in, to a Windows machine, you'll see a hidden folder that has whatever, which is Finder's way of doing, quick cataloging, and also version control. So I would also try copying it off of the SD card and then putting it back on clean.
Mm-hmm. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Jeff, real quick.
Just this was a good reminder, and I was thankful that I checked this several days ahead of the event where I needed this trimmed file. I don't need it till Wednesday, so I'll have time to fix this.
We do have an IBM exec or former IBM person in the room also. Peter had his hand up.
Where's Peter? Oh, Peter, go ahead.
So the only comment I would make is, Alex, you gave me the advice because I asked you several months back about the Mini, and the other thing I found that solved this problem in concert with that was you have two choices of how you format your cards. Since I'm always on Mac equipment, it's always formatted as OSX extended.
Yep.
That way,
yeah.
The material, it's a consistent view, because exFAT is going to lose some information.
Hey, Jeff, do you know if yours was exFAT or extended?
Mac OS extended.
Yeah, that's all I do. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just one word there on formatting SD cards. The partition type used in an SD card is part of the SD standards. SD cards are FAT16, SDHC is FAT32, and SDXC, which is the big ones, are exFAT. That is part of the standards, and I would not mess around with it because it'll mess around what gear that works in, and I wouldn't put a HFS formatted card in anything from Blackmagic.
Oh yeah, we do it all the time. That's all we do. So we won't use exFAT. We haven't had any trouble with that, but definitely things that need to be consistent. Anyway, let's go to the next question.
And that's another reason why FTPing is better than swapping the card. You don't have to worry about those. All right, next question.
One last thing is that we always the only thing I'll say, the last thing is we always format the cards in the HyperDecks. No matter what HyperDeck we do, we never format it on the computer. Yep. Anyway, go ahead. Next.
All right. Everything you always wanted to know about HyperDeck and SD cards.
Exactly.
Ivan Orbegozo from Mercer Island. Alex, can you please walk us through how you can take control remotely of the BRIO Logitech webcam?
Does anyone have a BRIO right now? No, Hosmuk's not here. Do you have it on? Is that what you're using right now, John? Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll go to John and I will request camera control. I'm waiting for John to approve my request. So once John has approved it, interesting. I don't have the, interesting. I can switch your cameras, which is, I'm now on your cam twist.
That's dangerous.
That's really, that was not what I expected. For some reason, yours doesn't let me. You're using a BRIO. That's what you're looking at.
This is the original BRIO. I got it.
Oh, it might be the original. Yeah, so it might not be
first came out.
So the newer ones, the newer ones, and I don't see now how to I'm going to remove the pin. I don't see now how to uncontrol it, but with the newer ones, I get a little control interface right here when I request it from someone from the distance.
It's in his it's in his ellipses. You can remove control or something like that.
Oh yeah, give up camera control. There we go.
That's it.
So usually I'll get a little interface where I have a zoom and a directional thing that I can move around, and I've done that in the past with Hosmuk's camera, where we've reframed Hosmuk in South Africa from my house in California, and so we do it all the time in our. The one thing that I haven't figured out, and Guy, maybe you figured this, I can't control the remote camera through Zoom rooms in the interface, right? I can't control the there's Hosmuk's jumping on. Here we go. I can't control the Zoom in the Zoom room. I can't control it. So what I have to do is to do that. I jump in as a third person into the Zoom room when I'm doing a point to point, and then I make the adjustment and then I leave. The one thing to know is if you're using a BRIO with a Zoom room, is the one issue you get into is that that it always goes to the widest. So when it hits a BRIO, the BRIO always wants to go to as wide as the BRIO can go. And that is problematic because you'll be doing a bunch of stuff that's in medium, and then the Zoom room takes over and goes wow, and so you have to have that control.
So I'm looking at it right now in participants. If you click on the person, like right now, I just clicked on Hasmuk and I said I can say request camera control from the Zoom room.
Oh, you're in the Zoom room? You're in the interface? I don't know why I couldn't see it.
And now it says open camera control. You can now control. So is it moving around?
Nope. Oh, let's see. Nope.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so
I'm
you're controlling that in the interface. Okay,
Yeah.
then I must be missing something there.
So again, it's
Okay.
in the so it's kind of hidden. You got to go into the participants and then right click or click on their head and then
Oh, got it. I didn't.
and then say request camera control from there.
You know, I didn't think about that because it's only a point to point. I wasn't thinking about what I'd have to do to get to that person. So there's only one other person there. So I was looking for the controls that I didn't think I had. So there we go. So I've been corrected. So you can do it through the Zoom room without the wonky roundabout way that I was doing it.
And then the most
but yeah.
important thing is to enable far end control on the meeting itself. If you don't, or webinar, if you don't have far end control enabled in the back end on the Zoom.us site, then it will not work. It won't show up. So that might be the hidden thing that you're missing.
Yeah, and no, we have that. We definitely, I have that
No,
forced.
not you. Sorry, the original poster or questioner.
Oh yeah. Mine's not only mine is not only on, it's locked. As an admin, there's all these things that we need for meetings, and I just lock them all in the admin thing. Just like I don't want to have anything possibly turn those off. And so, thanks, Osmuk. Thanks for coming in and being a guinea pig for that process there. Do you want to stay in the thing, or do you want to go back to attendee? Go back to attendee. Okay, hold on. So anyway, so that's how you control that, and it once you can do it, it's pretty addicting. Like you don't want to have any other camera that you can't control when you're doing it for events. Next question.
Yeah, Jonas Dotel wants to know what's the best microphone kit for max 300 euros, about $350, used for meetings and live streams.
So what's that? Is that about $450 US? Is it still 1.350? Oh, it's wow. Euro has dropped. I don't know. What do people think? Best mic.
I'm assuming mic kit means the interface as well. So
yeah. I mean, I do think that we do get away. It depends on part of it depends on how close your camera is. Like my camera is pretty close to me, so I can get a mic that's pretty close to my mouth, that's right below frame if I want to. Like I don't have it here, but my PR40 will sit right below it for Mac break, and you don't see the, I can have it right here, and it's only 6 inches away, and it works pretty well. So you could theoretically have something like so if you have a close enough camera, all these things kind of interrelate to each other. You can get away with something like a Yeti at $300, in that $300 range. I'd be tempted to get something that, whether it's the Audio Technica, or the Shure like MV51 or something like that. I would be tempted to get something that is on a stand near you. Of course, I mean, I think you can get these little $10 Pulsons or Piles for the average user. I think you get almost the same quality once it's been compressed to a video conferencing thing. I don't know how much it falls off pretty fast, without those headsets. With those headsets. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, at that price range, I probably look at the Shure Beta 58, or maybe a mic that Victor has, which is the, what do you call it, the Worker Bee or something like that, and then pair it with a Scarlett 2i2 or a comparable interface.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, there's a ton of choices for that price range, and that includes not only microphone but also the mixer, as Mickey would mention, the Scarlett or a Behringer or something like that. That's either USB inserted, and then even a mic stand or boom arm, scissors arm, and things like that. So you have a ton of choices, and of course, do you want it USB or do you want it XLR? Do you want to be able to connect up other devices to that, to like a mixer to do podcasting or live streaming or Zoom calls? Those are some. You got a lot of options possible.
I'm not a big fan of the analog Behringer equipment. I'm a huge fan of the X32 and the XR18s and the XR12s and everything else, but those get pretty expensive. I think that the Behringer analog boards are not great. Mickey?
Yeah, just to build on what Jeffrey said, like if you're at a budget that you could afford to have a separate microphone from the interface, aka like not using a USB mic, I'd rather you separate those out so that you actually have room to grow. You can use those individual pieces of gear for other things. It's like if you want to move up, you can't use a USB mic with a different mixer, and you can't
Right.
have multiple participants. So if you can separate those out, and I think at that price range you can, then I'd rather go that route.
Yep. Next question.
Yeah, Doug Ferguson wants to know, for non-technical people, how easy is Davinci Resolve to learn?
Go ahead, Sky, and then Jason.
Coming from a nonlinear editing background and Avid, it is a more traditional linear, coming from the original film with bins and things like that metaphor. So it is very, very robust. It is a suite of tools. It is not just an editor. It has the ability to partner with underneath one umbrella, an audio, a compositing, but its base was originally from the highest quality color correction, and then they added on editorial, and then they added on compositing, then they added on audio, and they did it at the highest levels, and they have pinned them together, and they've actively been using good engineering and good listening to their community. So they're not just sitting on their laurels; they're continuing to move it forward. So that's a little deeper question, deeper answer than is it easy to use? I don't know. How much nonlinear editing do you want to do? iMovie. Just do iMovie.
Jason, then Stuart, and then Jeffrey.
There's this thing in psychology called the curse of knowledge, which means once you know something, it's impossible to act like you don't know it. That said, I've used Final Cut very, very heavily for many, many years. I found that it was very easy to start using Davinci Resolve when I simply forgot what I knew and stopped trying to make it work the way I was expecting it to. From that moment on, their fast edit is fantastic. Their multicam edit is spectacular.
Yep. Stuart, and then Jeffrey.
Coming from an EDIUS background, Resolve felt a little slower to use, but I found the same sort of thing as Jason just mentioned. Once you give up the conventions you're used to and just try use it as they intend to, it's actually pretty easy to learn. And the price for the free version makes it worth the effort to try.
Yeah. So Jeffrey.
Yeah. So I did my my first ISO ATEM Mini ISO for mixer, and it at first coming from I started actually in Sony now Magic's is I can't think of the name. Vegas, yeah, because of course it's from my hometown. So, and then I moved on to Premiere Pro because of the fact of being able to go from Mac to PC. I do have the new Davinci Resolve 16, which I'm installing. The free version, the biggest thing about that was the interface, understanding where everything lies and how to go from bin to edit to anything. And then that toolbar that lies underneath, that was a little bit weird for me. But yeah, I got the hang of it pretty quick.
It's what I will say is that what I wouldn't try to do is just hack through it. Resolve is not I'm just going to open it up and start figuring it out kind of thing. Blackmagic's got a ton of videos that they've made about how to do it. There's a lot of other resources. We're probably going to talk more about it here just because I have to use it a lot now. But I wouldn't. There are so many places that you can click the wrong button and have it do something that is not what you expect, and things get lost in there. That I would probably I would recommend watching those videos and spending some time actually, to Stuart's point, learning how the app wants to work as opposed to just trying to figure out how you're going to use it. Because if you don't understand that, you can get into deep water really fast, and you definitely don't want to go into a production that way. I'm going to go ahead and move on. We'll come back to more Resolve stuff in the future, but I'm going to move on. We got a lot of questions now. Go ahead.
Okay, another one from me. YouTube, is there any advantage to regular latency and ultra low latency in YouTube?
Go ahead, Joe.
It depends on the resolution that you're looking for, and obviously the latency that you're looking for.
1020.
One more time. Sorry.
HD.
Okay, then you can go ultra low latency because you can't go.
You can't. Yeah.
But it doesn't get you like more than a couple, like 100 milliseconds, maybe more.
No. It's considerably more. So your ultra low latency is 3 to 5 seconds. Low latency is 8 to 12 seconds, and normal latency is 19 to 22 seconds. Like those are the windows that you get on a typical. And the difference between low latency and normal is that they just get rid of the buffer. So it's the same stream. It means that it's less stable for the viewer because it's gonna it means that if they have a lot less room to have any issues on their home, whatever. Ultra low latency says, you really want to have a conversation with the chat. Like if you're the only reason you would use ultra low latency is if you're using the chat, using the comment field. If you're using the chat, then the ultra low latency makes sense. It doesn't make sense anywhere else. It's lower quality, it's higher instability, that type of thing. Go ahead, Joe, and then Jason.
Yeah, normal goes up to 4K. I think low goes up to 1440, and then ultra low maxes out at 1080p. I know we're talking about.
I don't think ultra does 1080p. I think it's less than that. I don't think it does 1080p.
Okay,
I could be wrong. But I think it's half that or something.
Okay, because according to Google, according to the documentation, it says that it doesn't support 1440 or 4K, which implies that it supports 1080, but it doesn't explicitly say that.
We've had it fall apart a lot. Like we've tried the test with ultra low latency had us go, that we'd have to have a really good use case for that, and we haven't found it yet. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, two things on ultra low latency. First, no matter what, you better have a really good reason to do it because no stream is way worse than a stream with an ever so slight delay. Second, don't do 60p. Whatever you are doing, do not go with high frame rate if you're going to kill your buffer.
Unless you're doing a game or the reason people do it is gaming or sports. Go ahead, Neil.
Yeah, when with our live streams on StreamYard, needing to do ultra low latency is like an absolute mandatory because it's a 20-second delay before the comment shows up in StreamYard, and then another 20-second delay before we can even read it and then send a response back. So it doubles the actual latency.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that we get into, and it just depends on the number of questions and everything else, is human latency versus technical latency. So, for instance, the question that we're about to handle right now from Jonas is the next one was asked almost an hour ago, and so that's what we call human latency. So if we're managing questions, the chat is running at its own speed, and then the questions are at their own speed, and so when you separate chat from questions, we find that the latency of the stream means less. Anyway, next question.
Yeah, so Jonas wants to know what's the best way to gain every gain stage. Should he use a tone or something else?
Mickey?
Yeah.
or Jeff. Yeah.
Or Jeff. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would set everything downstream at unity gain, and if you need to use tone to do that, to make sure that from one device or one piece of software to the next, you get no change in level, and then go back to your first stage, which should be your mic preamp, and optimize your preamp gain based on the sound source that you're in front of.
It's good. Perfect answer. Next question.
Yep. Rick Combs wants to know, I know I can stream to multiple destinations with Restream.io. Is it possible in Wirecast to send 2 separate streams to Facebook and also to YouTube? If this is possible, it seems this would be a more cost-efficient option.
Go ahead, Jason.
It's possible, but you better have bandwidth for days and days days.
It's bandwidth and CPU power. You're asking your CPU to do more work, and you're asking your bandwidth to absorb more there, and so those are the two big things. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
And there's one more, and that is GPU power, because you can send out via the GPU rather than the CPU. There is I don't know how he means by a cheaper way. There is a cheaper way, and that is to actually set up an OBS instance, and then set up a second OBS instance by copying the folder over. So you have 2 OBSs, and then one would stream to Facebook, one would stream to YouTube. And I've done that
if you're only using it for streams. If you're only doing streaming, if you're not doing, and And again, the cheaper way to do it if you're not using it all the time is something like AWS, where AWS, if you use it all the time, is going to be more expensive than Restream. But if you're going to do an event a week for an hour, AWS is going to be a fraction of Restream to send it out to a handful of things. And then Guy Cochran has got there's a link. Yeah, so the link, you plug that thing in and it pumps out to the AWS. But you can use the link, but you could also use RTMP. So you could do something from home, whether it's the link or just wirecast RTMP into the cloud, and then in there just pick off all the different things you want to do. You're paying, pennies an hour. I think it's like 60 cents an hour or 80 cents an hour to send it out to each one of those. So it might cost you, if you're sending out to 4 different services, it might cost you $250 an hour to do that. So you just have to do the math on how many streams you're doing to make that viable. Go ahead, Jason, and then Jeff.
I'm curious if anyone has ever, just on the panel, used FTL in production. I never have. I've toyed with it, but it seems to me to be a bad idea in general. Its relative merits do not outweigh its relative potential for cost.
Nope. What is FTL?
Faster than light is a way to encode a stream.
Yeah, no, haven't used it. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Neil.
More of a question about this. What's the difference having 2 streams, one to YouTube, one to Facebook, or just taking your YouTube and embedding it or sharing that to Facebook?
You'll get a lot less views on Facebook. So if you don't do, most of the platforms will penalize the non-native posts, all non-native posts. In fact, Twitter, I have found, if I put up a YouTube link to this show, for instance, I'll be penalized for days on Twitter. Like the number of number of people who see my posts goes down dramatically. And so, so posting links to other services tends to get hammered. That's the issue. Neil.
Yeah, just going back, StreamYard, like that's why we've been using it with at Google for our products or our streams. We're doing like 6 a week, and you can stream up to 5 different locations or more with their pro license. All you need is just good bandwidth to do upload in 720 or 1080, but it ticks a lot of simple boxes. It's not a lot of customability, but you can get your information out there.
Yeah, that's great. Next question.
Yep. Gregory Wheeler. Alex, do you put diffusion on your ring light kits?
They come with diffusion. They come with like a diffuser on them, but I haven't put anything else in front of them. It would be kind of interesting to have like a little blimp that I was thinking about that when I saw the question go by, like it's something that would have some structure that had the ring light, because the ring light's really designed with the camera in the middle of it, but we don't use it that way. We always use it as over to the side so we don't get the ring on it. But I was thinking about it'd be cool if you had something that had like a little bit of a rib that would just ping onto it, like onto the thing and just create this big bulb, would look really nice. I'm going to keep moving because we're running out of time. Go ahead, next question.
Yeah, speed round. Stuart asks, has anyone seen a BMD Streaming Bridge in the wild yet? Was it easy to set up, reliable?
I don't think anyone's seen it yet. Jeffrey?
Not yet, and I pre-ordered
it
the second it arrived.
It's not out yet, but I also heard from a low bird on a stick saying that there's a new BMD product coming out too.
Cool. Next question.
Rupert McRae, what would be a good external microphone to connect to an iPhone for a vocal performance student, classical singer, to record stream his performances on stage, like solo auditions, showcases, etc., from a camera position in the auditorium 20 to 30 feet away?
None. No, there's nothing good. There's nothing. 20 to 30 feet away is a long way away.
Dreaming.
Go ahead. A wireless road.
Yeah, Mickey. And then Jeff.
I just get the
real quick,
like an SM58, and then Focusrite has a bunch of interfaces that will work with iOS devices or mobile devices in general. Also, IK Multimedia has a bunch of mobile device compatible interfaces. If you have the budget, go Mix Pre 6.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeff. What's that? Oh, I can't hear you, Jeff.
Sorry, Shure MV88. That plugs into your Lightning connector Probably 20, 30 feet is a little bit distant, but for classical vocal, they're going to want to have some distance away to capture the vocalist and pianist together.
There you go. But yeah, 20, 30 feet would be a long distance. Next question.
James Babbitt wants to know, how would you cut the wind noise in an iPad microphone when using the iPad outdoors on a windy day?
Go ahead, Joe, and then Jason, and then Stuart, real quick.
I think similar to the last question, you're going to probably want to look for an external mic that either plugs into Lightning that you can put a windscreen on, or you can get a Lightning to USB adapter, which was significant, or USB-C to USB-A adapter, depending on the iPad you're using. And then you can use any USB-A mic, which would significantly increase your options there.
You're good. Jason and Stuart. And then
I
John
would take
Ellison, real quick.
I would take a dead cat, cut it in half, get a little bit of super glue, and actually put a tiny little bit of dead cat. It sounds crazy, but I bet it would work.
It would. Go ahead, Stuart. Anytime someone says super glue near my iPad, I'm like, no.
Basically the same as the last two solutions. Only I was just holding up the bit of foam off the microphone to do it.
Yep. John Edelson.
I work with the state parks. We've tried to do lots of different things. I think we've tried every possible thing, and we decided there's no good way of preventing wind noise getting into an iPad or an iPhone. External microphones.
External mic, the only way to go. Guy, and then Lawrence, real quick, 10 seconds.
Yeah, Mickey was just holding them up. Brightcoat makes little stickers that are basically undercovers and overcovers that you can stick on, so they have adhesive tape and they're meant to go underneath. But yeah, those little guys right there, you just stick them right over the top of. These work great on DSLR mics too. Yep, they look just like that.
Interesting.
You just remove the adhesive, stick them over the mics, and good to go.
Interesting. Go ahead, Lawrence, real quick.
Yeah, same thing. It's these little things work very well.
Yeah, that's great. I've never seen those before. It's cool. Next question.
Jonas wants to know, in your 2-event setup, is that done via the API or is it done in the UI? Are you streaming to other events at the same time?
It's in the UI. I'm assuming this is an AWS question. I'm not using the API yet. I'm working on a skill. One of the AWS engineers I was talking to was able to say, the activation word for his hardware device, and says start streaming, and it turns the link on, start streaming, or turns up a Raspberry Pi that starts playing out video. It was kind of amazing. So I'm a little obsessed with the API thing, but no, I'm just using the thing, and I can have as many different events that I'm sending it to that I need to from Media Live. Next, and we'll talk more about that. I would open it up right now, but then I'm showing you a bunch of events that I can't show you. So I have to set up the interface before I can open that up. Anyway, next question.
And just incidentally, you got to check out this industrial strength Raspberry Pi that I just posted in Mukana. It's crazy build if you're interested in that sort of thing. All right, I'll go to the next question here. Michael Vosbein, seems like the easiest way for untrained people to set up a mix minus in Zoom is with the USB mixer. My Yamaha MG10 has a USB in channel on its own fader. Super easy, no confusing aggregate device or loop back to set up. Comments?
I don't try to have untrained folks do mix minus. Go ahead, Jason.
That is absolutely the easiest way to do it that you can't get wrong.
I mean, if someone doesn't have the skill set to do it, I usually try to get them on a SM58 or something that has a high off axis projection that you can have their open speakers or whatever, or I have them, and that's the thing that if I understand your question correctly, but we try not to get anybody. Mix minus is something that it's not complicated, but if you don't understand it, you can create a lot of damage really quickly. Jeffrey?
Yeah, there's still a lot of faders, a lot of dials that can get moved around. If you're right there with them, that's one thing. But if you're doing it remotely, probably wouldn't do it.
Yep. Next question.
Greg Gibson, what do you consider to be the can't miss sessions of Zoomtopia?
As I'm going to miss them all, I don't think that any of them are can't miss. but they're all recorded, right, John? So we can actually see them. Yes, they're all going to be recorded. I won't see any of them live. They're in the middle of my workday. But any John that you think are specific ones that we should look at? Your sync is perfect, John.
Get there. I was going to go look at the agenda. Actually, some of the most fun things will be in between the sessions because they have a great set of well-known speakers and celebrities. So they're all going to be great. Anything I say will get me in trouble.
Very good. All right. Next question.
Peter Rosado, as time permits, any thoughts on Nvidia Maxine? And he includes a link.
Any? Oh, go ahead, Jason.
It always annoys me when when a copy is used heavily that includes the term AI, because if you don't know what ML actually is and how to learn and base things, it doesn't mean anything. It's one of these kind of gauche terms that has lost all meaning. It's just so passé, it might as well not exist. That said, Nvidia tends to do stuff cool. They also tend to write great copy and then do who knows what with it. So I'm cautiously optimistic. That said, every time I see AI in ad copy, I'm immediately turned off.
Very good. All right, so we're gonna shift gears. By the way, I put John Edelson. You had put in the questions the Shakeout California. I just put it into Makana. There's no question there. Kev, did you have one comment about that, about the Nvidia thing?
Yeah, I was just about to say, in the Makana links earlier on, I actually posted a link where the BBC Click show does a demonstration of that new AI where it basically fakes you in real time. That's what it's about.
Cool. Yeah, so a lot of the stuff that we see looks silly when we first start playing with it, and then over time it grows into something. You have to kind of experiment and play around with what's possible. I think VR is a lot of that way. A little bit of the AR stuff, hasn't reached critical mass, but it doesn't mean that it won't. Now we're going to go ahead and switch gears. So one of the things that came up last week that we said, we should probably do a whole hour on is dealing specifically with building business, and how do we pitch stuff and how do we talk about those things. And I think there was an interest in, hey, there's a lot of us that are technical, but we're not, there's a lot of people, we're having a lot of technical talk, but we still have to figure out how we're going to actually use those techniques and those tools to build business. And so there seemed to be a lot of interest in it, and we went 15 or 20 minutes into it, and I said, well, why don't we do this as a second hour? So we're doing that as a second hour. So if you have questions right now, specifically around building business, growing business, that type of thing, and we'll have our opinions about that. I think that there is some of it that's a black art, but I think that there's a lot of it that I think that is some very key basics I think that we can probably hit that I think make a big difference. But we've got a couple questions to start with. So if you've got questions about this, if you're trying to figure it out, Sky put actually a couple questions in here, so we'll bring them in here. Go ahead, Phil.
Yes, so Sky asks, first off, is in a media-saturated world, what is a USP? Is that a standard practice, I guess, for a sustainable business? If everyone has the same gear, what is the difference between a professional and a person with gear? Can we talk about value and price?
Unique selling proposition.
Okay.
Right. Go ahead, Jason.
In general, I don't think that everyone will have the same gear, especially these days. There are just too many details. Really, what you want to show is mastery of what you have. That's really what matters. A finished product, a demo reel, that kind of thing. So if you haven't done it, fake it, and then say, look, here was the test.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I think if you're talking about gear as a separator, you're looking in the wrong direction. I know guys that are craftsmen that use old gear, and tons of guys with new gear that don't know what they're doing. And the selling proposition is, can you touch the client's need to make money or to do whatever it is they're trying to do? And can you appear like someone who can help them get to that goal? And it may have nothing to do with operating a mix pre. It might just be, oh, by the way, I can operate a mix pre, but I can also help you, drive that car a little faster down that road that you're going.
Right. Go ahead, Jason.
Also, one more thing. I would say with respect to the web, Alex is completely right about this. He's mentioned kind of in passing that if you're doing a Zoom meeting and you look and you sound better than anyone ever has on Zoom, you will get a crazy amount of business. That has been my experience over and over and over again in the last quarter or so.
Well, in general, I mean, there's little things about all this stuff that I think makes a difference. Number one is that what's going to build your business is your relationships to your customers, relationships to other vendors, relationships to, someone trusts you and goes, okay, I want to hire that person because I know them. Like, I have to know that they're technically ready to do it, but I also want to know that they are someone that I can trust. For me, like when I built my crew for a bunch of shoots that we were doing recently, first I went to my brother. I talked about this a little bit before, but first I went to my brother. My brother wasn't available. He's really good. I mean, I know how hard he works, and so it's easy for me to bring him in. He gave me a recommendation though to someone that he trusted. And the other thing is, and then I asked them for the gaffer that they were a DP. What gaffer do you want to work with? Because I want a smooth relationship inside of that. And so much of this is relationships with other people, and that's one of the things that I think that is kind of the design for what we're doing here at Office Hours, is that we're here to learn and to trade notes, but we're also here to get to know each other on Discord, in the panel, in the chat. All these things are us developing relationships with each other where we go, oh, I think I can hire that person, because I think that I know I can, I've gotten to know them wherever they are in the world. And I think that is when with Pixelcore, we had people building whole companies together, and we've seen that here too, people going into business with each other based on people that they've never met in person. And so I think that, part of Office Hours is to learn. The other part is for us to build a community and a culture that we feel like we can trust each other to send work back and forth between us. And that takes a lot of time and effort. One of the things we did in the Pixelcore, which we will do in Office Hours into the next year, is start to build teams where we have, and we've started to play with that here, but the idea is that we built production teams that would do test projects that never made any money, but it would let everybody work together, because then what you saw is not what they had to say, but what they were like to, did they get stuff done when they said they were going to get it done? Were they good to work on a team? Were they, you got to see all the other pieces of their personality. And that's how people really got to know each other, is in those kind of team structures. At one point, we had over 260 or 270 people in teams that were all kind of working on 27 projects at the same time, and then all trading notes on how they did it. But more importantly, getting to know each other and getting to know that process. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, coming from theater, of course, you learn to trust the actor. Are they going to fall off the stage? Are they going to know their lines? Are they going to support you if you forget your line? Then moving into LA, it became very much a gypsy concept of, we go to a show and then we go to another show, and then the homogenization of the crew continued kind of shift, but there were oftentimes people.
But it doesn't, like even in LA, we pick people.
Yes,
someone's
that's my
Rolodex
point.
Someone's Rolodex becomes super important, and you just have to remember that
it's huge. It's
when you're
everything.
if you're an individual on a set or someone trying to run a company or whatever, how you interact with everybody at every moment that you're on the set makes a difference. Like, it's not, and then how you respond to emails, how you respond to phone calls, how you do all those other things are all important. Like, people are making decisions about you based on whether you show up to the meetings on time, literally also how candid you are. I mean, regardless of all the stuff that's going on under the surface, like if you're dealing with a client, it's not their problem, and one of the reasons that we tend to shield operators from clients is because operators sometimes can be too candid, like where they're just talking about all the things in their head about these things. And it's like, you don't need to, we'll figure it out. And obviously the client needs to know everything that's going on, but not everything that's in your head about what's going on, and I think that is a really complicated piece of the puzzle, but it gets back to, it's really, you do have to have good gear. Like, it doesn't, but you don't have to keep up with the Joneses at every moment, but you do have to have solid equipment that when you show up, like when we show up for a lot of the live streams, you have very new equipment that's all set up, that's all pre-wired, that we're not messing around with, that is all working. That creates certainty, and so when it's all working, it has backups and things just don't, there's not a lot of stress, and we're not doing things at the last minute with things breaking down. And I wasn't always like that. There was a lot of times when we were like going in with this luggage and backpacks, and I had a client, I'm not going to mention who the client was, but before one of our live streams, this is probably 2008, my client had to lie down before the event because we had so many things go wrong, and that was it. I was like, this is never going to happen again. And that's when we
Good.
started buying gear. Like that's when we started like buying equipment and doing everything properly. Before that, it was like, oh, we'll rent what we can when we land, and we were all over the world, and we were kind of doing, but they were like these little kits, and they were all wired together, and we were using we were using what was it, IOXTs with our laptops, and we had these little kits that were kind of bouncing around. But we had just gotten started doing it from somebody else, and we realized that we were never going to. And as soon as then we just started investing in hardware, and then our shows started getting bigger, and before we knew it, we were doing $1 million shows, so, but you have to, but a lot of it had to do with, there wasn't what I identified. This gets back to what Phil was talking about, is identified a gap. There was a bunch of mom and pops like what I would started with. And then there were broadcast trucks. And what I identified is there was this huge window between them that was completely unstable. You don't know if it's going to work, or super expensive. And if I could just slot myself into that, I could stay busy. And I did for a long time. Go ahead, Alex Golner.
Yeah, I although I've worked on events and stuff like that, I'm much more of a video editor and motion graphics person at the moment. And one thing to understand is your clients don't really have a good way of knowing if you're a good editor. They don't really actually have a way of doing it, because they don't know what footage you had, what notes you were given and stuff like that. So the catch, of course, is how do they assess you? They just find out who your recent clients were and what area of the market that they are, and that's completely unfair. But you have to deal with the world as it is, and not as the way you think it should be. So the solution about that is to, once you do get a toehold or a recommendation or something like that, just be the person who, at the end of the meeting, people are happier than at the beginning of the meeting, and being that person who is able to do it and is able to kind of give people the assurance it's going to be okay. And then, and now these days, of course, is to have the most better feeling after a Zoom meeting. If you have 7 of the throughout the day, to be the one person to be the least painful Zoom meeting, to be that person who's actually kind of been the person that made people feel better.
Drinking coffee for that reason.
So yeah, it's the
yeah. To your point, you are as good as your last job, and you really want to think about what that is. And again, there's definitely an even keel that clients want. I get pretty sensitive to people telling my clients that everything's okay or everything's great. Like, I don't want anyone to tell the client that. I just say it's nominal. Clients, if you don't worry, it makes your clients worry. You want to be, they want to know that you're attentively paying attention to everything and everything's okay, but we're still vigilant. We're still looking at what could go, we're still kind of working through those things, but there's like this tension that you want to have with what you're working on, because specifically, if you tell everyone that everything's great and then it's not, they'll never trust you again. So you just have to be very careful of how you use everything is great. There's this tendency that I see other people that I've worked with or that I've had work for me do, where they want to tell you everything's great, and it's not really I found that talking to clients later, it worried them that person, they just didn't think they were getting the full scoop. So you just got to be very careful of that wanting to make everyone feel good. And just be like, yeah, if you ask me, I just say everything's nominal. We're doing good right now. And, we're just going to keep working on that angle.
Well,
Good, Jeffrey.
I think I quoted you is that it's the internet, and allowing that to be not the scapegoat, but it is flexible.
You'll hear a lot of qualifiers with me when I'm talking to clients of, it's as good as it could be right now. We're as sure as we could be, we've done, this is all the stuff we've done to make, and we test incessantly. The goal again is by the time the client shows up that everything's smooth. You just keep on trying to figure out how that happens. That's why we want to show up so early. That's why we do so much extra work. That's why we pre-build kits, is to make sure that the client doesn't feel the stress that we do. Jeffrey.
So getting back to the hardware for a second, have you ever exchanged out your hardware going, let's say you're doing a show that's a Panasonic and you're running all Sony cameras. Do you switch out to Panasonic cameras? Do you mark out the Sony equipment? Because I know I've been in situations where people would walk up and go, oh, you're using that camera or that device. And I just kind of feel like, yeah.
We absolutely, I had a whole set of Panasonic cameras because we were doing live streams with Panasonic. Absolutely. If it's client, if it's public facing. Now, on the back end, we used all kinds of different things, to manage the rest of the stream, whether we were cutting and everything else. But the cameras that were on the show floor at NAB or whatever were definitely their brand. If the brand makes it and you're doing it for them, you're going to use that brand. Like you're going to figure that out. Go ahead, Sky.
I did the Windows 95 launch on an Avid on an Apple. Just saying.
Yeah. Well, but and again, one of the big secrets for a long time was that no one used anything but Keynote for a decade. Where no matter who was presenting, no matter what company, it was all Keynote in the background because the event teams didn't want to do anything else. And then Microsoft and Google put the foot down, like you got to use our product for that, and then that changed. But there was a decade of not doing that. Next question.
Sorry about that. That was quick. Okay. Sky also asks opinions on the difference between being a service and being a content creator. Is it possible to be a successful artist and a business person and still have friends?
Go ahead, Jason.
That's an extremely meta question. The answer is, of course it is. As far as the difference between the two, I think it's really just a matter of how you see yourself. If you are presenting for a client, then they are the content creator. And you are just the vehicle to put it on the internet. With respect to the kinds of events that Alex does, do you see yourself as a content creator, Alex? I mean, you are, but not really. It's their content.
When I do this, I'm a content creator. When I'm doing it for the client, my job is to do to produce the best result for them possible. It is not, I'm not worried about my expression, in that area. Now, I'm always learning something. I'm learning how to do something better. I'm learning and I'm always trying to improve their product. So one of the keys is when you're working for somebody, especially right now I'm fortunate enough to work on things that I'm working on things that I actually care about. So it's easy to do that for me, to work on those things. But I've worked on, 80% of the stuff that I've done, I don't care. Like I don't care about the product, the content. But what I worry about is, trying to constantly shave off the video quality and the audio quality and the tightness of the show and everything else. That's the craft, right? So you're constantly paying attention to your craft of how you're put every single event. It doesn't matter what it is. It's all the craft, and you're trying to every show, whether you care about the content or not, it doesn't matter, because what matters is how good is the video and how clean is the show and how did you start? And, we play that game every single show and so the conversation internally in my teams are never about the content. They're never about, unless they ask us to talk about the content, then it's all about then we're talking about the content and we're figuring it out. But when you a good example of where it kind of grows is a lot of times when you do that really well, you gain trust and you're able to do something a little bit more and then a little bit more. I was just managing the Hangouts for the White House, the White House events that Google did. I was just managing the Hangout the first year. The second year we were managing most of it. The third year we were managing all of it. The fourth year we were designing it. So it was, but that came from strong execution, of what, and then you're able to take advantage of the things that you've learned between all of those events to really make it better and great and more efficient. But you have to also pick your battles. If the client says, "Oh, I want to have this person write the script," you just go, "Sure." I'm not going to fight over whether that's the case or not. I'm going to work on the things that I do get and do them excellent. That's you just want to just try to everything you do. You're trying to do it and one of the big mistakes you'll make is you'll get something that's low budget and you'll treat it like low budget. That's a disaster. Like don't take on if you're not going to play it full out, just don't take the job. Jason and Jeffrey and then Mickey.
I couldn't agree with that last part more. Be sure that you are willing to give it 110% at the price that they are willing to pay. If you don't do that, then you are actually destroying your potential leads. And with that, actually, I have to go into production. So I'm out of here.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Right. Yeah, Jeffrey?
So I run technically two businesses. One is my Geekazine, which is basically I'm the content creator. Nobody has any say of what I do or how I do it. And then I have another business with my friend Alistair in New Zealand where we do enterprise IT. And it's called Build Day Live. Basically what we did was we went to these enterprise companies and then we'd show how to put their appliance or their software into a data center. And we've since had to change it a little bit so we can continue to do this. But the thing is, one thing that I've noticed in what I do is, even though I don't call myself a content creator on that other side, I find that there's a lot of people that don't have an idea of how it all works. Even if we sit there and we say, okay, this is how we're going to plan it, this is how we have the whole plan, and they're still relying on you at the day. So I kind of find myself becoming a content creator every now and then, just to make sure that we're all on the right page. But yeah, if they say, hey, we need to do it this way, we do it this way.
You're like, it's not, I don't argue about it. And I also, the big thing is I don't argue with the client once they've made a decision. And also I don't take my foot off the gas. Like that's a deadly thing that artists do, or production people, is they just kind of, now they're going to go into passive mode for the show because they think the whole thing is screwed up, and they could have been much better if we had done X, Y, and Z. That is it's how you don't get more work. Mickey, and then Kev.
Yeah, when you're being hired by a client, they usually have a goal. They have a message they want to put out. And when you're being hired, your job is to, with your experience and your knowledge, relay that message. Like, not so much put in your own, like, relay your personal message. You want to relay the client's message. So, you can have your own personal projects where you can release your artistic need, like your artistic belongings, but when you're being hired, you're doing the work for the client.
I mean, it's why I tend to distinguish that we're artisans or craftsmen and craftswomen, not artists, because I'm just like, this is, and we have to remember Michelangelo and Da Vinci, they were doing that for somebody else. Like, that was somebody else's asking them to do that. Now, they got really good at it to a point where they got to kind of express that to some degree. But remember, they weren't just making paintings, like, for the most part, that was a job. Like a lot of those things that we see in the
Commercial art.
Louvre was something that they were asked to paint. And so we're being asked to paint something, and we execute it. And the incredible opportunity is that you get to learn on a budget. Like you have someone providing resources for you to learn how to do something, and hopefully at a larger and larger scale. Go ahead, Kevin, and Alex.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can't mention the name. A big client uses me a lot. I do a lot of their writing for them, and I had a phone call about 3 months ago where they was asked they need their website completely rewriting. Something's happened. Okay. I got a phone call from the person who said, would I be willing to do it? So I took a look at their site, the one that needed doing, and I thought, well, I can do that. It's easy, but it's not going to be cheap. So when it came to the Zoom meeting, the first comment that came out the other side was, well, I don't know who you are, but X has recommended you. What do you think the problem is? And I simply said, 3 words. You've got 3 words missing. We, our, and us. I says, with those, and as I said it, the guy's face on the other side, he leaned back, smiled like, oh, thank God. Just because you can ask questions of a client, they may not give you the answers you're looking for. So prepare yourself, know the subject you're going to. You don't have to know the detail of the product so much, but it's the culture, where the place is located, where their markets are, what their audiences are likely to be, and customers. That all has to be taken into account. I mean, when I'm writing for these people, I write in international English because there are differences in the business world, and I also avoid all references to jargon, especially in the corporate market. Yeah. That I know gets eyes staying on this subject, and the results show themselves. So I ain't cheap, but I do deliver.
That's very good. Alex?
I suppose when I was actually what was called a PowerPoint operator, or the presentation designer, or the person who was interpreting some words and turning them into presentations, or sometimes motion graphics, sometimes it would only be like 1 day before the event, and it would be a rehearsal. And part of my job as an individual was to reassure that I actually bought into what the message was of the person who was going to give the presentation. Because usually what happens is first thing they say, do you have the latest version of the presentation? And the answer is yes. Or if they haven't, we have to negotiate that, getting the latest version of the presentation. But what I do is I find a way of finding the thing they're interested in it and buying into that. not for the whole of my life, but just for that half an hour when I'm with them. And usually that comes up with quite often me making the kind of jokes they would do with their colleagues. Just a little joke here or there, just a little bit of, usually in my case, a little bit of cynicism, but the kind of thing where they kind of realize that I'm, instead of just being a disinterested person pressing a button, I'm actually a person who's bought into something quite ironic or silly about their world. And then they realize, oh, this is somebody who's prepared to collaborate but won't unless asked to, and they're actually going to get the job done, as opposed to somebody who is just waiting for a beep in my headphones. But actually, I'm actually working out what they need to have happen, and I'm bought into what they care about, is the way I do it.
Every client, whether they're the producer or if they're hiring you, the goal is that you're thinking more than they are about the thing that they hired you to do. So if you're just doing what they asked you to do, then they might keep you around. It's not like they'll never hire you again. If you don't do what they asked you to do, then they'll never hire you again. If you just do what they're asking, you're on the list. Like I can fill a gap there. But if you're the person that's thinking ahead of them and thinking about the next thing that needs to be done without thinking too far ahead. Like I was that person a lot, which is that you would hand me something when I was younger, you'd hand me something and then I would think of this and then I think of the 80 other things that you could do and I'd already start working on them and I destabilize your project. I mean, this is like 20 years ago. I would just be, or not maybe 30 years ago. I would just constantly be adding things because there was like all these possibilities. And so you don't want that person either, because that person just causes all kinds of chaos, And so, so you want to have someone but they are thinking about these, for a client, you're thinking about the next 3 steps, or you're thinking about how to make it better than they can see it. Like we get templates for broadcast. We've been getting a lot of them recently. And we clean up all the spacing. We just, they send us something, but we clean up all of that spacing and we work on some of the text and we tie everything down a little bit and we refine things and we're quietly, doing things that they didn't even think about, that made it a better show. And they can't see it. Like they can't see it. They can just feel it. Like they can feel like the show feels like that's the thing you have to realize when you're doing a great, when you're doing it is they'll feel it. They won't see it. It just feels more, like more there, but when I'm hiring people, that's what I'm looking for is that, I'm expecting them to do their thing and think of things that I didn't think of. And that's when you have an all-star team, when everybody is, and I generally try to keep it to that almost all the time now, like people who are going to think harder about what they're doing than I'm doing. Go ahead.
Oh, and don't forget, if you're dealing with a new client, don't be afraid to ask to see what they've already used, what their previous projects were, because that will tell you a lot about where they were, and also you might see what they like and also find out what they don't want to see. That is often very important.
I often ask them to show me things that when we say, okay, you want to do this kind of show me ones that you think are great. Like just show me, like send me a link or, let's, tell me things that you want to aspire to. That helps me model what they're going to do. Guy?
Yeah, a lot of us are creatives, and so we have this right brain versus left brain thing going on, and so it's important to look at learning Excel and just being able to know where you're billing and know where you're spending your time in pre-production, post-production. It's easy to have that distinction, like Alex just mentioned, of I'm going to go make this better and go down this rabbit hole, making this little tiny line evenly spaced for 20 hours, and that may make the difference to you, and it may pitch the client, but sometimes it's get it done in budget. And it's important to have that team that has both sides of the puzzle, some creatives and some analytical left brain, right brain. And if you have an imbalance, we've been through these corporate trainings where you can actually see it. We did a disc profile on all the employees and you can see if you're out of whack. And so it's important to have that balance, because if you got a bunch of people that are just killers, or like people that are just what we call drivers, they can overdrive and not dot the I's and cross the T's, and they forget all the analytics, and it's easy to run off the rails.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Well, I just want to say thank you. My goodness. And I kind of asked the question for the whole community. So thank you for letting me pin myself to that wall. And but I just again, I think the last part of my question is, and how do you continue to stay friends? And I have made new friends here. And you and Alex, thank you for this community. And I will look at my spreadsheet now.
Well, the trick is never to make any enemies in the first place. You'll always be friends with your clients.
I did. The thought that kept bubbling up in my head, and I don't know where it fit in the conversation, was putting lipstick on a pig. Is oftentimes what we're called in to do, and it's like, oh, how do you balance and make that pig look the best it can?
You just do the best you can inside of the tools that you have, each one of them, and then you move on to the next one. All right, next question.
So Doug wants to know, when you're a small business and very technical and not good at the selling part, what are some thoughts on how to even start the selling part?
I mean, go ahead, Jeff.
This is kind of something I thought of in the previous question, but I think it applies more here, is that part of what we do is solve problems. Like you were saying, that you're thinking ahead and you're solving problems the client doesn't even know about. And so if you're very technical, be that person that just makes everything go smooth for the client, and let them know that you are going to, their event is going to go smooth. You're going to take care of things they don't even know about. And as you do that, that word will get around that you are a problem solver. And that's what clients are looking for. They're looking to pay you so they don't have to worry.
Yeah, go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I think a little different angle into that, kind of what Jeff was talking about, is if I get the chance to talk to somebody who I feel is, a client or a client type person, somebody who's generating work for some people, a doer, I'll often just try to have a human conversation with them and say, what are you stuck on? What are you challenged with? Whether or not I think I'm going to be able to provide that service for a fee, I want to be seen as a person who is a giver, who is helping them figure out what their next step is. And 1/10, 1/4 of the time, it might be something I can help them with. But at least it's a dialogue now where I'm hearing them express, I need an X, Y, and Z. It's a different way of asking. And then an opportunity to help them figure that out.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jeff.
Building off that, Phil, when they do tell you something and it's something that's not in your wheelhouse, and you refer them to someone
and you still help
that
them,
is the right person, that builds that trust.
Right. No, absolutely. And a lot of times the other thing to think about when you're working with clients is that you don't have to put everything that they could possibly do into the current project that you're in. A lot of times we think of a lot of things for clients and we just wait for the opportunity to come by. You don't, like, when they're ready or they're asking a question, you can make a small suggestion and kind of move it forward. And if you have a long-term relationship with them, that can help. Anyway, next question.
Yep. Stuart wants to know, when looking for new clients, how do we get around the gatekeepers with brand snobbery, those who repeat the we only shoot on Canon, we only shoot on Red, we only edit on Apple mantras? How do we find the people we can build those key relationships with?
It's funny. I guess we don't find that many clients. In my world, they don't really ask me what I'm using, but I don't know, like, they don't ask what equipment I'm using to do what I'm doing. They just want to have it pop out the other end. So I don't get into that many discussions. I think it's when they're integrating, if they're doing it if they're doing some part of it. Go ahead, Stuart.
I deal with a lot of people who are film production, especially, we'll say indie, which is different to US
Right.
independent. US independent has a budget that would be mainstream media in Australia. But people who they're snobs about gear and they only want to shoot on the latest camera or the newest piece of equipment because that's what they saw somebody else do and their product looked okay. And they keep forgetting about the people who are running the gear, who are the artisans with the expertise. And it's like, if you're an editor, you can edit. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it on Apple or PC or
It does,
Final
except
Cut or Edius. You've got the skills to tell the story.
It does, but then they're committed to you. So part of the problem is, especially when they're getting to know you, if they know that there's no chance that they're ever going to have to touch it, then that's one thing. If they feel like there's going to be like they may have to redo some of it or be part of it, then that's when they get, it's how do they integrate with the rest of that larger team, and becomes more of an issue, I think. Sky?
Well, because I worked in high-end compositing world, we used to compete against Flame, and we would get a production assistant saying, I'm supposed to call and ask if you have a Flame. They didn't ask about the quality. They didn't ask about your history. Their job was just to find a Flame operator, Flame facility, because at that point, Discrete had put a lot of money into becoming the Porsche or the high-end compositing system. We did Avid DS. We could composite. We could do all the finished product and make you go fast and make you look good. But again, that brand had kind of, pushed us out.
Well, and there were
challenges.
definitely things, and it also depends on what they need for what they're doing. Like there are things that you can only do in a flame at that speed, and then there are a lot of things that you can't. There was things that you would use After Effects for because it was easier to. You could actually do a better.
The font was horrible in Flame.
Right. Yeah. But I think that the question is that people get into it, and it's a shorthand for them of. I just know that it works when I go that direction, and it probably has a lot to do with the operators that they were using. Flame operator tends to be, really expensive, but also oftentimes, at least in San Francisco, it's pretty well trained. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, and a lot of times those questions in those days were like, do you have a Prada bag, or do you have fancy shoes? It's a little bit of asking, are you sexy enough for my project? And that was the sexy project. But I would say a way to combat that, if you're not providing that sexy thing, but you believe in your quality, say, well, you know what, we don't have Flame, but you know what, Coca-Cola doesn't mind that, because when we do all their projects, they love it. It's sort of trying to slip in some other sexy another way.
And the thing is that then when you are able to buy some of that equipment, it does, for us, like literally someone asked me about the green. Elementals have this green front, used to have a green front face. Now it's orange. It's very ugly, but it was this green front face with lights, LED lights, and you could see them from a distance. And someone asked me, I said, someone at Elemental asked me if those were important. I guess it was some question about whether they should spend money on those little front plates. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, I've sold over $1 million worth of work. I think I had calculated about $1.4 million worth of work just from those front plates, because people would notice them and they'd ask what they were, or they know that they were Elementals, and they knew that I had real encoders. Like I wasn't like using my laptop, and I wasn't using FMLE, and I wasn't doing everything else. I had real hardware encoders, and it made a difference. Like when I'm dealing with Fortune 100 companies, their teams made a decision about what I'm doing and how serious I am based on seeing some, so that you are definitely going to have some of that, but it takes a long time to, build that up. Also, just being able to do insurance, for instance, we haven't talked about that, but the fact that we had, $5 million of liability and $2 million of loss, and like all that stuff, if you can't produce that, easily and quickly, then you're out of a lot of work, in the United States, and you can outsource that, but it feels different to a client when it's yours versus when you're outsourcing that insurance. And so you have to feel at the size that they want to have, that they want to have it there. So go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, just going back to Stuart's question, like so sadly, like in terms of cameras, that's the nature of the beast. It's almost like a flavor of the month kind of thing. It changes so rapidly. And if I see the same thing here, this month everyone's on crazy about the 12K. Next month it's going to be a different thing. And like I think it would go back to the previous question by, I believe, Doug, about selling. Like, if someone asks for a Red, or someone asks for an Alexa specifically, then just say, yeah, personally I don't have one, but yeah, no problem, you can shoot on one. I mean, and you solve it internally on your end. You rent, or if the project will pay for it, you buy it. And it shouldn't be an issue. Like if you currently own the piece of equipment that your client is specifically looking for, there are always means of getting your hands on it.
Yep.
It's just a tool.
Yep. Good. Next question. We're gonna go on. We're gonna run out of time. Good.
Okay, next question is Larry Tang. How to convince clients to do virtual events? Most are still skeptical and want to wait for in-person.
I think mostly that they're going to be waiting for a long time.
It'll be a long wait.
Yeah. It is. I don't think that maybe they'll get to 50, but we're now looking at another surge. The thing is I think that for us, that waiting is starting to wane, because they just aren't sure when that's ever going to happen. Guy, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember your quote of the free is the something 1,000 milkshakes, or How did that one go?
Oh, yeah, free drank. Free drank 1,000 milkshakes.
Free is the straw that drank a
Oh, that drank
1,000
1,000
milkshakes. I think it was,
Yeah, exactly.
So I've gotten some really great connections by doing some volunteer work, and so sometimes it's about starting small, proving what you can do, and that also shows, just how you show up. So I would go and do some free stuff just to show people how it's done on a small scale. You don't have to go huge. I've made the mistake of going huge where I gave away like tons of work where it was like I wound up having Google come in and take over the show because I was like, I'm done. I can't give away any more free time doing this. I mean, I was giving away weeks worth of time to do an event. But yeah, that's how we learned. We learned like one time we had somebody plug in a GH5 battery and it took out the whole show. And then that was after that, it was like UPSs on everything. And, nobody's plugging anything over here. And we actually had at the venue another breaker installed that was dedicated and high enough amps to handle the rack. And so you just learn. So that's the thing is fail, and it's better to fail on a free thing. So free is the straw that drank 1,000 shakes.
I don't do, I go in and out. If I'm slow, I do a lot of free stuff just because I stay at a pretty much a constant rate of work. I mean, I'm either really busy or just busy, but I don't, if I'm just busy, then I start working on, I mean, if I go below busy, then I'm doing free stuff, experiments, I'm doing R&D, and like the stuff that I'm working on right now was based on R&D that I started 2.5 years ago on my own, just filling time to figure stuff out because I knew that it would eventually become useful. So, and I spent 6 months or almost a year just failing at it, in my spare time, and then got to a point where I understood it so that I was in the right place at the right time when I needed to use it. Phil, and then Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, getting back to Larry's question, though, I think convincing clients to do virtual events, we still need a couple of gold standard projects that are recorded that we can point to. I mean, I still refer to the Tony Robbins event, as sort of, hey, here's some, gold bars you can shoot for. And I'd love to see other things from the group that anybody thinks is awesome.
Yeah, Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of events back and forth and I'm using those to show other people what we can do to make their event successful online. But the other thing you can also do is you can, if they're not convinced on it, maybe go for something a little bit larger scale, like for instance, an overall sponsor for the event. So that's free for them at that point in time. And then they can see what's going on, and then they can go, oh, well, maybe we should put a budget for this for future events.
Yep, Stuart, and then John.
I'm going to go with the brutal answer, and that is to ask them if they want their books to be in the black this year while their competitors are still in the red waiting. If they want to be in the black, they need to move now.
Yep, John.
Well, I think being successful, the Porch project, which was virtual field trips, went on for 20 years. COVID launched them, and their senior management watched them. You get your senior management to see success.
And also it gets back into, like, even if you're taking on a low budget job, is to play really hard to make it just right. Because what happens is there's somebody else in that meeting that goes, oh, that meeting looked way better than everybody else's, and then they follow up and say, who did that? And that's a big piece of that, Sky.
I just have really latched onto many of your catchphrases, Alex. I don't know where you got them, but they're all over my wall now. And one of them is, hope is good. It's not a plan.
Oh, hope is not. Yeah. I don't remember what
I don't know where you get these. You bubblegum wrappers, bottom of Cracker Jacks.
No, they're usually something. Hope is not a strategy. Is the quote, and it was said. I was on some event, and it was literally a side event. One of the VPs was someone, and someone said, "Well, we hope that they'll be able to do that," and they immediately snap back. You could tell it's something they say all the time. They snap back and said, "Hope is not a strategy," and I never forgot that. So you're just in some meeting and someone says it, and then you remember it because it's important. Next question.
And TJ Asher, how many people finding leads for new businesses? Website? How are people finding leads? Advertisements, word of mouth?
Cardboard sign on the side of the freeway?
Yeah. No, it's for me, it's all, I don't know. I just get calls. I don't do any sales. Like, I don't call anybody. I just the big thing is when someone shows up and asks me to do a quote or asks me to do something, I try to think about what they could do, and it usually comes to some reference, and then I just make sure that I handle it well. But I don't do a lot of sales, Doug.
Yes, most of our business, 98% of it is word of mouth, but but that's kind of where I struggle though, because I want the big clients with the big budgets, and so that's where, we have a good reputation of the people that know that we exist or know our work, and we have a lot of repeat customers, but it's our repeat customers don't have the budgets that I want.
Right. Sky.
I remember in Los Angeles somebody told me that corporate is cyclical, and they will often bring a video production because some VP of finance says, well, that's not our core competency. And then they'll kick that kick that whole service that they spent millions of dollars of a video production company inside of GE, but then they kicked it out, and then the next VP would come in and go, well, let's save money and let's bring it all back in-house. And so I'm curious if other people have experienced that cyclical making the...
Well, I've been brought into a lot of stuff because someone's looking for a solution and they bring me in. So, and you just never know. You really don't know who that person's going to be. I've had one person that was just an intern that I befriended because they were really cool. And it's been a lot of work, because they moved up, but at the time we made friends, it was just, they were just good people and smart, and I just hung out with them. So it was,
at Microsoft's quote is, be nice to your intern, for next year she will be your boss.
Yeah, exactly. Next question.
Doug also wants to know, what do you do with budgets that don't even come close to industry standards when the market and competitors are poisoning the well?
Go ahead, Kev.
Don't take it. If it's not worth your money or time, don't do it. Let those do it.
Yeah, we let people fail. They'll go out and they just don't have a great experience, and then they're looking for something else. They're at some point people realize that it costs more to do it than they thought it would. But clients who want it really cheap, who don't understand the value of what you're doing, will just drive you into the ground. It's not just that they that they're getting it for cheap. It's that they'll want you to do 6 other things, and they'll so because they just don't want to own you. Yeah, and they just the ones that are paying bigger budgets understand that this is important, and then it's a different ball game. Mickey, and then Jeffrey.
Yeah, same thing. Like don't take it, like stand your ground and make sure, like, for the clients that you get, you do deliver what they're paying for. So when others look at you and what you do, and they approach you and ask, like, hey, how do you do that, like, really great show? Then you turn around and say, well, we have the resources, and that resources cost money. Those resources cost money.
Jeffrey?
So a couple of years ago, I did an event where I was in California for another event, and I just needed to extend my stay for like 3 or 4 days. And they had an event that they didn't normally use stream over the internet. And I said, well, I can do it. And I gave them a price, and they said, well, can you do it for this price? And I was like, well, that's going to really stretch it, make it, not as easy to do. But, I worked out some numbers, and I ended up doing that. And I was thinking, well, if I do this, maybe I could come back next year and do it for that. And we did it. It was a great event. We got like several different panels, and the video was awesome. And then the next year they just didn't call. And then that's, you just got to pick your battles in some cases. For me, this was something I wasn't doing, and now I have it in my pocket, so I can pull it out as an example. But that's the only way I use it now.
And if I'm not that busy, I'll take on all kinds of things because I'm trying to learn something. I'm trying to see it from a different angle. I'm trying to, like if I'm, I stay busy. I don't try to stay over busy. Right now we're really busy, but if I'm slow, I'll either be experimenting or taking on other things that are going to help stretch me some direction to keep busy. I don't want to let my gear sit around. so I'll tend to kind of keep things moving so that I can figure something out. Next question.
Larry Tang wants to know, will Alex use NDI for his shows on Zoom? I heard that Zoom is going to introduce NDI option. Nobody look at John. I believe Meets already have it. Will this change the way we do our workflow again for our business?
It's not going to change my workflow. I mean, we'd still use NDI in the cloud and still use baseband in the office. So I don't, I wouldn't change anything on my end. I don't know if anybody else is. There's probably other people that are more NDI driven in here. Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, there was a great session last night on Facebook Live with AV Educate and Jeff Keithley. I mean, he really gave it his all. And some of the stuff that he said about switchers and route, he gave this really great analogy. He's like, would you feed that same signal through in SDI through a $5,000 router versus this $100 switch in NDI? And it kind of light bulb went off when it was like, you're not spending the same amount of quality on same amount into quality switches. And so some of these people just had incorrect switches, lame hardware, the eco settings that you've had the trouble with. So I think that it was a great eye opener in being able to kind of get the behind the scenes as to why some people are having success with NDI, tremendous success where it never fails. And so I think some of us have been bitten by it and had bad experiences, but I think the good is coming.
It is. I think the good looks a lot like 2110. Like it's just, so I'm just kind of skipping. It's not that I'm not paying attention to IP. I just think NDI is a bridge between baseband and 2110. But everybody that I'm talking to is building out with 2110. So that's why it's like kind of like I'm not disagreeing. I just think that there's a bigger standard coming that I'm more interested in. That's all. Next question.
Yep. Samant Sandir, tapping some of the newer opportunities is a mid to longer term activity. What would you suggest for outreach when one does not have a track record in these opportunities? Plus, there is the potential task of connecting with a completely different kind of customer.
I mean, the big thing for me has always been working with other people that are like-minded. I mean, that's part of what Office Hours was built for. We've got a whole Discord in there for people to play with ideas. We've already had a lot of people play with them. It's finding communities where you can play with other people and take on projects and talk through them. We're getting to know each other here, across this panel and Discord. And, as we do those projects, we learn a lot, but we're also getting to know other people that we can, kind of work through that. And then again, I've done a lot with nonprofits where that's led to a lot of other things because there's a lot of people that sit on the boards of those nonprofits that or connected to them that make a difference as well. I only work on nonprofits that I particularly like. I don't get into it like, oh, I got to build that as a business model. I got to be passionate about that. If I'm going to do it for free, I generally have to be pretty passionate about the work. I'm not, when I'm getting hired to do it, I'm pretty mercenary. When I'm doing it for free, it better mean something so for me to do that. So, but yeah, I think that everything I've done since I was, 20 years old has been serve the community that I'm interested in being in, like serve the community that I'm interested in connecting to. And then everything else just kind of sorts itself out. I don't have to do anything else other than, this is just what we're doing in Office Hours is just a much bigger version of things that, or even a smaller version of some of the other things that I've done. But like all the work that I got from Salesforce was because someone came to my classes on green screen. And Salesforce was having trouble with green screen, and so they hired us for one job, and then we did a whole bunch of green screen for them, and then started doing live, and then we started doing, that's how we learned how to do corporate live, and then ended up with Google. But it was all because I was doing something completely different, but serving that community. Go ahead, Stephen, and then John.
Yeah, the thing to remember with nonprofits is their funders are the ones with the money, and they're looking at how that nonprofit spent it. So if you do a great job for them, guess what? There's a big company that just now has a new tool.
Yep. John Middleton.
I was just going to say, Alex, it's interesting. My start with the California State Parks was helping them get a green screen working in the basement of the California State Capitol. And that's what grew into the Porch Project.
That's awesome. That's great. Next question.
Ed Willock from Valley Cottage, New York. For smaller businesses, startups, or freelancers looking to go into business for themselves these days, what suggestions for finding and getting in front of clients can you offer while they are building up their reputation and don't have word of mouth referrals yet?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I would get to know and befriend the larger established companies that are doing that. And when they get jobs that are too small for them, they may pass it on to you.
And the other thing to remember is that, I mean, a lot of people that I know start as working for other people in their crews. You know, that's how you get to know a lot of people, and you get to a point. You know, I think there's this thing like I can go start my own business, and that can be very difficult to jump start from scratch when no one knows you. You know, the way you get people to know you is you work on a bunch of other projects, and so finding projects that you can work on with other people, whether that's volunteer at first or then getting paid not very much. The key is, if you're not doing what you're trying to do at least 20 or 30 hours a week, if you're not in doing the thing that you're trying to do, if you're, you need to figure out how to fill that time executing. It's so key. It builds up connections with everybody else. It builds up your skill set. It lets you refine yourself. It lets you build demo reel material, but you don't want to just sit there and keep waiting for getting paid what you're worth when you're not getting any work. Like it's, like that's the thing, is just, you just got to keep it coming in. Go ahead, Kev.
Oh yeah, one other thing is, if you are established in this game, be nice to the people you work with, because I can tell you now, there's been 3 jobs I've had in the last 2 years, which all came from 3 people who I helped get them into the business. And at the time, I didn't even know I was helping them. I was just being me. But they never forget.
If you're, what Kev said is really important. It's just that when you identify someone as a good person, whether they're above you or below you, if they're a quality person, you just help them. You help them if they're behind you. Help them if you're in front of them. It's the term is in Mahayana Buddhism is the big boat. So there's no way to nirvana without putting everybody in the boat. And so and you're constantly pulling and pushing everyone to help them move forward in that process. And so you want to. There are so many places where there's people in front of you that are higher up that are trying to do something bigger than what they're ready for, and how do you help them do that? And when you do that, I showed up on Leo shows. Leo, I didn't get paid for working on Leo shows until he was doing podcasting, but I showed up on hundreds of shows for free that I put in huge numbers of hours for to be on Tech TV and to be, now I made money other ways against that. But the point is that I knew what Leo was doing was really interesting. I knew that he was, I thought he was an amazing host, and I just clumped on and kept on. I mean, I flew on my own dime to Canada to be on Call for Help every month. And, that was all stuff that I, connected to, and again, it's definitely paid off. It's definitely paid off, but it was a lot of work and investment in something that I decided was worth it, So next question.
Yes. Henry Ramos, best practices for growing your team in order to be able to handle multiple events.
It's probably the hardest thing is growing teams. And I think that it's one of the reasons that I created office hours, so I could identify more people, because I felt like there was going to be a lot more work to be done, and I needed to find more people. So around the world. And so finding a community that you're part of, again, this is designed to provide everybody that access to get to know each other, when people join the panel, they're meeting everybody else, and, and people are making decisions about that. When people are, how they handle themselves in Discord and Mukana and everything else helps them build connections with other people. So being part of that community. And then the other thing is you're hiring people. Again, who do you know? If you have to keep, and then you have to do the smaller jobs. You have to keep on experimenting with new people. You keep some people and you don't keep others. It's the power of the freelance thing from the producer's perspective. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, this is the classic question of how do I go from an entrepreneur to a business, a real legitimate business. And there's a great book I recommend to people called The E-Myth. And it's about basically going from becoming the technician who does everything great to becoming a manager, and it sucks. But what you have to do is you have to find people who are like yourself, or cultivate people, many yous, and put them in charge and be okay with that and know that's the path that you're on. I highly recommend the book E-Myth, and know that you're letting go of doing the work, and you're going to becoming a manager of people that do the work.
The tricky thing is that handoff. So there's a tendency to either hang on to too much of it or hand it off so much that you're not managing it anymore. And you have to do it. There's this kind of gradient that has to happen where you're still providing support and input and having them slowly take that away from you and slowly build that up. And then the other thing to look at is when we subdivide teams, I try to put a handful of strong people in, and then I have the new people around them, but I don't have a whole new team. You know, I have, I split up my A-level operators into those teams. So they bring with them the culture and the way we do things and how we do it. And, all those other things are
and that's
another
exactly
piece
right.
of it.
And that's what they say. The successful people, what they're doing is they're designing a culture. And if you design the culture properly, people know what the right answer is without ever having been faced with that problem before.
Right.
And so that's what you're having to build. That's how you get successful, and then are able to multiply those teams.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's really hard to do, especially at a high level. It's the hardest thing to do in business, I think. That and cash flow. Anyway, we'll talk about that as a whole nother hour. The last question.
Yeah, Dick Brewer, relating to TJ Asher's question, finding leads for new businesses. If you're a startup shifting from other business type, how do you expose yourself into a new jungle of service providers?
I mean, I think that the way I've approached things for a long time, whether it's building new clients or building business or moving from one career to another, has always been what I call the tank track, which is that I have one job that I'm doing that pays all the bills. I have something else in the front end that isn't paying any bills yet, but it's where I'm trying to get to. And I have one on the back that I'm trying not to do that anymore. But the one on the back was the thing that was making all the money before, and was the thing that I was interested in before that. So as they just kind of, you just keep on, as you're progressing, but what I don't do is like, I'm going to leave this and I'm going to go do something else. I have the thing that I'm doing, and then I always have the thing. And that can be, I can be working in a company and trying to grow the business in a certain direction. Like I have the clients or the kind of work that I'm doing now, but I'm looking out, and those other things are going to be things that aren't necessarily generating revenue right now or a lot of revenue. So I'm constantly playing with those things, trying to figure it out while I'm still generating revenue and paying the bills. So that's how I approach it. I don't know if that helps. And we are out of time. So thank you to everybody for hanging out with us today yet again. And I thought, was that useful? Was that useful to have these kinds of mix these into the conversation? Okay, all right. So we'll do more of these.
Absolutely.
Just talking about that process. Yeah,
and at some point, our lexicon and etiquette are those unseen things that might be also helpful, because as you said, I know Kev said the other day, well, it's just natural that. It's like, no, a lot of this is not natural. A lot of it is learned.
Natural. Yeah.
No, I've been doing it for years. And I'm looking for work too. So if anybody's interested.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. All right. See you, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow morning. We'll be talking about scopes in the second hour. All right. Thanks. Take care.